Have you ever wondered why Tokyo seems to hush after midnight, hiding its secrets behind every glowing window? What if a phone call in that silence could completely change your life? Today, you'll hear a story that will make you see late-night calls in a new light. Tokyo is a metropolis that never sleeps. Nightlife thrives here: bars, karaoke, neon lights, endless waves of people. Yet every resident knows that after midnight, the city's lights dim, and a particular kind of silence thickens in the air. That usual city noise seems to fade into the background, giving way to secrets and the very legends that make up the unique psychological world of Japanese nights. There are moments in Japan's capital when you feel utterly alone. Even if you see the dim lights of your neighbor's windows or hear music through thin apartment walls, you can't help but feel that the night itself has chosen you as the subject of its next tale. It's within this profound solitude, in the shadows of these silent buildings, that the creepiest urban stories are born, like the one we're about to recount. That let's meet our protagonist, a young man named T-shirt. He's a typical salaryman living in a generic concrete apartment building on Tokyo's outskirts. His days blur together: office work, pointless meetings, lunches alone, evening commutes on packed trains. This rhythm of life seems odd at times. Routine has become so familiar that even loneliness and relentless fatigue are now constant companions for T-shirt. He isn't a fan of bright lights and prefers to spend evenings at home, rarely going out. His apartment is a tiny one-bedroom filled with books, standard appliances, and clothes. Nothing unusual, just the typical space for a solitary Tokyoite. What does he dream of? Perhaps to break free from his routine, to discover his own desires, to become part of something bigger and real. It all changes one of those nights when the faintest sound can wake even the most seasoned city dweller. The clock shows 10 to midnight. T-shirt is about to sleep when suddenly, his phone rings, urgent and alien in the darkness. At first, he thinks it's a mistake. Maybe a coworker forgot some papers, or someone lost track of time. But the air in his room grows colder as this intrusion slices through the tranquil night, the ringtone cutting the silence like a scalpel. When T-shirt reaches for his phone, he sees a number he's never seen before, a sequence too long and unfamiliar to fit any regular mobile operator's format. Normally, he'd ignore such a call, but curiosity and a hint of fear mix inside him, compelling him to answer. The voice on the other end is strange, almost a whisper, feminine, muffled as if echoing through subway tunnels or the hallways of old Japanese houses. Most people would hang up immediately, but something in her tone makes him stay on the line. "Who is this?" T-shirt asks, trying to sound calm. No answer. Instead, the phone falls silent, and in that stillness he hears a faint hum, as if the wind has swept through his apartment. When T-shirt tries to check his call log, nothing, no trace. It's as if the call had never happened, like a waking dream. T-shirt tries to brush it off. Things like this can happen to anyone, right? But the vague anxiety lingers. After an event like that, even the city's usual quiet seems unfamiliar, suspicious. The story could have ended there. T-shirt gets lost in his own thoughts, unaware that he's just taken his first step into a world where the usual rules no longer apply. The city that once seemed so familiar and predictable now starts to reveal its darkest corners. Morning felt unreal to T-shirt. He moved mechanically through his routine, glancing at his phone. Nothing reminded him of last night's ominous call. Yet the lingering emptiness and fear from the night before had sunk deep into his mind. The city buzzed and hummed as usual, but beneath the noise, a tension ran unseen. Have you ever had the feeling that you're forgetting something important, without knowing what it is? At work, everything was familiar and mechanical, but each unexpected sound felt like a sign of danger. The office lights seemed to flicker a little more often. Strangers on the subway stared too long at their phones. What would you feel if your ordinary day began to fall apart into nervous fragments? Would you reach out to someone, or wait silently for the next sign? On his way home that evening, T-shirt cut through a deserted alley, the window of his apartment looking out onto a dark courtyard. Was that a shadow behind the curtain, or just a trick of the light? The digital clock blinked 11:45. After washing up, closing his bedroom door, and lying down early, he still couldn't sleep. Suddenly, the same ringtone. Exactly 11:47. His heart pounded so loudly it drowned out every other sound. "Hello," his voice trembled. Silence. A long, thick pause. Then a soft breath, barely audible, on the other end of the line. A woman's voice, rough, almost as if it sat right inside his chest. "You didn't answer yesterday." The tone was calm, as if this game had been going on for ages. Desperate, Tisha switched off his phone, but there was no record of the call, as if it had never happened. When the frightening things repeat on the same minute every night, do you look for logic, or do you surrender to panic? Paranoia took hold. He was afraid to look out the window. He turned off every electronic device, even the router. He checked the door, wedged a mug against the handle, hoping to catch any intruder during the night. The scariest thing is not knowing whether a threat is real or it's already too late to decide. He confessed to the only co-worker he talked to. Something strange is happening. Someone is calling. The voice knows everything about me. His co-worker shrugged, saying it's just stress. Maybe it was a bad dream. Tisha insisted. No, it wasn't a dream. After work, for the first time in ages, he tried to call his parents, but nobody answered. Loneliness became as thick and tangible as air before a storm. When would you ask for help, if even your friend didn't understand you? The next time, the woman on the phone said his name, listing details from his life. What he'd done that evening, what was on his table, that he hadn't taken out the trash. Out of nowhere, a new fear. He realized he was being watched, not just through the phone. He turned off the electricity, hoping it might help, but at night, his phone rang again. Would you hide, or would you run? Terrified, he logged into his old Skype, only to get a video call from the same strange number, this time through the internet. When even the internet becomes unsafe, is there anywhere left to hide from fear? On his laptop, an unsolicited email arrived, just a string of his own pictures. Old ones, new ones, private ones, moments no one should ever have seen. He slammed the laptop shut, clutching his phone, determined not to answer again. But exactly 1 minute later, the same call buzzed on his landline. Fear isn't only the unknown, but the loss of control over your life. Is there any way you could shut the world out? He remembered, as a kid, warding off loneliness with whispered rhymes in the dark. Now, those words felt useless. The city had become a prison. Sometimes, in the window, he'd catch what looked like a stranger's reflection. Or maybe it was his own face, twisted by fear. He tried staying over at a co-worker's place, but at exactly 11:47, the co-worker's phone vibrated with the same call. The threat was no longer tied to one device, it was everywhere. What would you say to yourself if that voice knew you better than you know yourself? Returning home, Tisha found a note on his door. Only one night left. Choose. He dusted chalk around the door frame, so he'd see if someone tried to get in, but by morning, every trace was wiped clean. He was alone again. Night was coming with the question, what would happen if he didn't answer a third time? In a world of digital nightmares, only one question rings louder than fear. Who else is watching you in the night, and could they reach out, not just from the other side of the line, but from the other side of the screen? Evening arrived, casting long shadows across the city and deepening the silence in Tisha's apartment. The sun had barely dipped beneath the horizon before he felt that old, electric tension shifting just beneath his skin. Every night now carried a sense of premonition, an anticipation that something terrible lingered nearby, waiting for its time. He tried to focus on mundane things that once soothed him, reheating dinner, watching mindless videos, scrolling endlessly through social network feeds. But every notification sound left his heart racing. His mind replayed the previous night's calls like a curse, always at 11:47, always the same strange, coldly intimate voice. He'd tried everything to block the number and silence the phones, but nothing worked. No record appeared, no evidence left behind. Tisha's world, already small, felt shrink-wrapped to the suffocating walls of his apartment. At work, he found himself flinching at even the smallest sound, a dropped pencil, the hum of fluorescent lights. When he tried to tell his only semi-closed co-worker about the voice, the man only laughed and said he was watching too many horror movies. That night, Tisha stared at the clock above his bed. 11:32, he tried to read, but the words slid past his eyes. He lay down, then sat up again, unable to decide if he'd rather face his nightmares awake or asleep. His phone was powered off, the battery removed. Still, dread grew like ice under his skin. 11:45, the familiar, isolated quiet descended. Outside, the city became a portrait of emptiness, ears straining for any sound except what was coming. 11:47, the laptop screen, black for hours, suddenly flickered to life. A call request popped onto the display, no name, just an impossible string of numbers. Before he could react, the camera blinked on, and his own pale, startled face glowed in the video preview. He almost slammed the laptop closed, but an undeniable curiosity kept him frozen. The call answered itself. On the screen, a silhouette appeared behind endless digital static, a woman's face blurred, her eyes two pits of shadow. Her lips barely moved as her whisper slipped through the speakers. "Are you alone?" Tisha backed away, bile rising in his throat. "Who are you?" he managed. "You know who I am. You've been expecting me," she replied. Behind her voice, echoes twisted the audio, the slow, measured breaths, the faint sound of a train passing far away, as if she were already inside his apartment, blending into the wallpaper and the hum of the city outdoors. "Why are you doing this to me?" he said, barely above a whisper. She laughed, a hollow sound that seemed to ripple the air. "You called me. You built this emptiness. I only entered when you invited me in, night after night, with your silence." Tisha felt goosebumps rise on his skin. Had his loneliness truly left a gap in the world for something else to slip in? Her words were both accusation and prophecy. The video screen glitched, the face distorting, the eyes vanishing entirely. The woman's voice became many voices, whispering his name, recounting memories he'd never spoken out loud. "You wander these city streets alone. You leave lights on just to trick yourself that someone might come home. You deleted your friends' messages, ignored your family, and swore you were free. Each empty call was an invitation." On the verge of panic, Tisha tried to shut the laptop, but the video call would not close. The camera light stayed on. The whispers continued, now sounding as if they were circling him in the room. He pleaded, "Please leave me alone. Tell me what you want." The voices merged into hers again, cutting through the storm of echoes. "I want you to answer, Tisha. One last time. Answer with your door. Answer with your heart. Or I will come in either way." Time seemed to stretch and warp in the blue light of the laptop. Was he awake or caught in the deepest nightmare yet? All he knew was that he couldn't look away from those flickering eyes, black pools promising the end of every isolation, even if it meant surrendering yourself completely. The screen abruptly snapped back to black. And yet, Tisha knew with gut certainty she was still there, somewhere between the cracks of his lonely apartment, waiting as the last seconds ticked down to tomorrow's final call. The heaviness in the air was suffocating as the final day unfolded. Tisha went through the motions at work, but everything felt tinged with unreality, as if he moved through a fading photograph. Every noise, a passing train, a stranger's footsteps in the hallway, even his own heartbeat, seemed suspicious, ominous. His co-workers' laughter rang hollow, the ordinary buzz of city life now grotesque in its normalcy. As dusk approached, the color of the world faded into dirty grays. He caught himself jumping at the smallest things, a cup rattling on his desk, the elevator's chime, a brief spark of static crackling in his headphones. Shadows grew longer, and Tisha's thoughts spiraled with them. He wondered if each, in their darkness, contained the shape of the woman waiting. Every time his phone vibrated, he recoiled, breath catching even if it was only a spam email or a weather alert. Back home, the apartment was cold and silent, echoing with the anticipation of what would come. He locked the door, checked it 3 times, then dragged the couch in front of it. Lights off, curtains drawn, everything arranged to eliminate hiding spaces for shadows. He removed the batteries from his phone, unplugged the modem, and even turned off the fridge, feeling irrationally that her influence could travel through any current, any wire. But Tisha knew, truly knew, that if she wanted in, no mundane precaution would matter. He sat in dim lamplight, a battered notebook and pen in trembling hands. All day he'd tried to write a message, something to leave behind, a record of his state of mind or a warning for anyone who might someday find this place. But his thoughts tangled. He scrawled a line, "I am not alone," then crossed it out. Panic and yearning blurred together. For the first time, he wondered if his contact with others, family, friends, had sealed his fate as much as his solitude. Was it possible that being seen and being forgotten were both equally dangerous? As midnight edged closer, the sense of being watched thickened. He became convinced the darkness behind the curtains was pressing up against the glass, listening for the sound of his fear. His eyes flicked between the laptop screen and the clock, trying to ward off the feeling that something was crawling nearer with every tick. 11:39. Tisha hit record on a cheap old tape recorder, desperate to gather proof or at least a witness to whatever would unfold. He spoke into the microphone in a trembling voice. "My name is Tisha. If you find this, something is coming for me. Or maybe it's already here." Silence pressed back. The city outside was a distant hum. At 11:43, a low wind rose and made the window rattle. At 11:45, all natural sounds receded. No traffic, no voices from neighboring apartments, no murmur from passing trains. Time now moved with geometric clarity, marching toward the inevitable. 11:47. The knock on the door came so softly, at first he thought his mind was playing tricks. Then again, firmer, the old wood shivered in its frame. Tisha felt every muscle tense. He pressed himself against the wall, heart thundering. In the darkness, the red light of his laptop camera flicked on. His dead phone trembled in the metal box, vibrating again, despite no power source. A third knock, a slow, deliberate rattling of the handle. Then the whisper, so close it could have been right beside his ear. "I said I would come in either way. What will you choose?" He didn't dare approach the door, but with each moment of hesitation, he felt the pressure on the edges of reality. Like the room had shrunk and thickened, the air curdled by the anticipation of intrusion. The tape recorder whined softly, the reel turning as it picked up every scraping footstep, every shaky breath. The apartment filled with tangible dread. The shadows on the walls seemed to grow spines, twisting and crawling, almost alive. He wanted to scream for help, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he whispered back, "What do you want from me?" The answering whisper came from everywhere and nowhere, chilling and sweet. "A place. A welcome. You invited me all those empty nights. This is your answer." The final knock was thunderous, echoing not just in his apartment, but through the bones of the building. A coldness swept the room, burning through every layer of denial Tisha had built for protection. And then quiet. The lights in the apartment flickered and died. The hum of the city beyond vanished. Even Tisha's own breath seemed to leave no trace. He crouched in the dark, gripping the notebook with trembling fingers, waiting for the moment he would have to face what he'd let in. And outside the door, the silence thickened, as if the world itself had stopped, holding its breath, waiting for Tisha's answer. Something in Tisha surrendered as the silence pressed inward. The world beyond the apartment door faded to shadows and fog, details smudged as if the city itself hesitated, breathless. The final knock seemed to ring on forever in his bones. He was only vaguely aware that his hands trembled on the tape recorder and notebook, evidence for someone, anyone, who might remember he was here. Without understanding how, he watched his own hand reach out, fingers resting on the door's cold metal handle. There was no resistance left. There was only exhaustion and the almost animal ache to end the waiting, to fill the hollow silence, even if it was with terror. The door swung open. The hallway was gone. In its place stretched a corridor of shifting, endless darkness, neither indoors nor outdoors, familiar yet rootless. At first there was nothing, no shape, no sound, but then she took form, step by step, from the shadows themselves. Her presence was defined by its absence, by a coldness that seeped under Tisha's skin and made his breath catch. Her hair spilled over her shoulders, black absorbing all the light. Her face was young and ageless, the skin as pale as memory, her eyes bottomless, silent invitations into nothing. He tried to step backward, but for every step he took, she advanced exactly as far. "You called me Tisha," she whispered, her smile both tender and cruel. He wanted to run, anywhere back to the working world, to the drone of trains, to the safe anonymity of crowds. But he could not move. The rules of ordinary time and distance had ceased to exist. "Why me?" His voice was a hollow scrape in his throat, desperate and childlike in its need for explanation. "I was just lonely. That's all it takes," she murmured. Her outline flickered like a dying signal, shifting through the forms of every woman he'd ever passed on a night street, every forgotten face in the crowd. "You opened a door that should have stayed closed. You built this emptiness, one silent night at a time, and I slipped inside." She offered her hand, her fingers impossibly cold and slender. He did not want to take it. His mind rebelled, desperate for hope, for an exit. "This isn't real," he thought wildly. "I'll wake up." But there was no waking up. The coldness of her touch was too vivid, her breath like winter on his cheek. Around him, the apartment warped. Framed photos blurred to static, paper pages faded, even the tape recorder's red light dimmed, the last witness to his fading presence. "You wish to disappear," she cooed. "I'm granting your desire. What remains of you will linger, softened by memory, erased by time, but I will keep you. You'll be among the others who have called and let me in. We're never alone, Tisha. We're always listening." She took one step forward, and darkness closed over him. For a long time, there was only the sense of falling, of leaving himself behind, of merging with all the unseen souls who had answered the last call. The next day, the apartment seemed untouched. The couch still blocked the door, the lights still off, the room faintly chilled as if someone had left a window open to the night. When finally, days later, the building manager entered with the police, there was little sign of recent life. Tishi's phone lay in its tin box with a dead battery. The laptop was still running a now corrupted video recording, nothing saved but an hour of static. On the table, the battered notebook with just a few final, looping lines scratched in frantic haste, words fading out, as if the pen itself was losing energy. I am not alone. I am not alone. Neighbors gossiped over the empty flat, trading stories of soft footsteps and faint knocks in the dark, of midnight lights flickering on behind drawn curtains. Nobody could say exactly when they'd last seen Tisha. Nobody ever remembered seeing a visitor. But sometimes at 11:47, in the deepest hush of night, a phone would ring, just once, from inside the empty room. And in that precise, fragile silence, you could almost hear it beneath the hum of the city, a woman's voice, soft as velvet, brushing the edge of a whisper. Are you alone? And all across the city's lonely towers and narrow corridors, shadows seemed to shudder and listen, waiting for someone to answer.